Welcome in, everyone. This is Sean Swentek, host of The Future Current. I'm here today with one of Omnidian's investors, Ernst Sack, partner at Blue Bear Capital. Ernst, thank you for joining me today on the podcast.
Thanks for having me, in a fantastic podcast title.
Thank you for that. I spent quite a bit of time actually getting that, and AI was a big help. Blue Bear Capital, obviously a leader in sustainable energy investing. What drew you to founding the company and focusing on that side of the venture capital space?
Sure, yeah. So I had spent about 10 years in energy-focused private equity and some time in energy M&A, and before that always focused on emerging market development, sociologically and economically, post-Soviet privatization of energy resources, all that stuff. And deeply fascinated and committed to the energy industry and its development to become more sustainable, more accessible, more economically efficient, but was becoming frustrated that so much money was going into putting steel in the ground as it must, and so little attention was being paid to software and really specifically to AI. And I had a lot of conversations with energy corporate executives and boards in my private equity role, and it was always dismissed as this Silicon Valley thing that doesn't apply. That's an internet thing. We're real men putting steel in the ground. I felt that was understandable, but overall short-sighted, because AI is really the future of how information processing and thinking and all these things are going to work. So every individual decision you're making as an energy company is going to, sooner than later, be augmented by AI and digitized. And I just didn't see anybody really focused on connecting those worlds. In Silicon Valley at the time, Clean Tech 1.0 had arguably failed, and there was less appetite than there is now. So saw an opportunity to step into that gap.
If you were talking to a founder in the energy space today and they weren't actively engaging with AI as part of their business plan, what would your words be to them?
I think it's a tricky semantic puzzle, because some people just don't believe AI is an appropriate or meaningful term. And if they're saying, no, I don't believe in AI, but I'm doing all of this data-informed workflow automations, like, okay, fine. So then we're just arguing about terminology.
Yep.
The opposite is almost worse. People who claim to be doing AI and aren't doing anything substantive at the data level.
I would argue that is worse, and unfortunately, we're seeing a lot of that out there today. Now, you have been involved in a lot of major investments over the years. Is there one that you're just maybe most proud of today?
It's probably a cheesy response you're going to cringe at, but it's really the, abstracting out a bit, the decision to commit to this industry in the first place. Again, I'd spent a decade plus in larger institutional investment platform world, and the default path was to go be the energy guy or the energy transition or renewables guy at a big multinational private equity firm, which is a great seat, but felt like that was not as additive as what I'd love to be doing, because not only was I seeing this gap, but I was meeting a lot of founders of early stage startups. We could talk about Omnidian, of course, who just weren't getting the institutional investment attention. And so an alternative was to stay in institutional private equity and put my money in NVIDIA and Bitcoin. And I instead made the commitment to put all of my life savings into Blue Bear funds and this concept, both as an LP myself and into the operating company. Just, I think oftentimes startup founders don't appreciate that venture investors are often founders themselves. And the team we have, the portfolio of partners and business leaders we have now has paid off so meaningfully. And of course, the trajectory of financial returns for the investors that keep all this going is a critical part of building an ecosystem that's going to fund a lot of the innovation that we want to see at a planetary level.
Yeah, not cheesy at all. Fully bought into all that, although I do hope you saved some money and put it into NVIDIA Bitcoin.
We can get to that.
One of our co-founders, Ray Shulko, when I was telling him I was going to interview you, said, please make sure you ask Ernst, tell us about your investment thesis and what qualities you look for when you make investment decisions.
Yeah, well, we've got a pretty specific strategy overall at Blue Bear, which is to apply AI-enabled technologies and digital solutions to energy, infrastructure, and climate end markets, and do that primarily at the early revenue stage, so seed A, maybe early B. And what we look for, therefore, is where is there an exceptional pairing of subject matter and end market knowledge, intimate understanding of the problems that your own customers have day to day, know the vocabulary, know the power structure, know the supply chain, but pair that with genuine lived experience in technology development and innovation. And again, the Omnidian team is a fantastic example. All three of the co-founders, Mark, Ray, Dave, have lived in the solar industry and have a real spectrum of operational, strategic, and technology expertise. And that is such a powerful combination because on the one hand, you get the Silicon Valley tech bros who are going to fix an industry with AI, and they don't really care to or feel they need to understand that industry yet because they're such first principle thinkers and bring such deep tech capability. And that just, maybe it's true at some level, but it doesn't sell and it doesn't translate. It doesn't lead to the right product development down the line. And then you also get kind of the crusty old utility guys who know everything's broken, but they're going to fix it in-house and they don't need some novel new technology or newfangled AI to improve on what they've learned their whole lives. So either of those extremes work, and we love the harmony of combining the excellences.
I love that. I got to give a shout out to the fourth Beatle of Omnidian, my mentor, Brad Davis, who was also there and who brought the culture and the brand, I think, to Omnidian that we really strive for today.
He's literally in the marketing hall of fame.
Literally. And yeah, I love that, you were on the forefront of AI as it related to solar. And you and I were talking before this about battery and where we're at in that stage of the game. And you're investing meaningfully and people are leading on the AI side of that. And I love that you recognize that it's not just about being in the space, it's being in the space with the right technology, teams, people, and the right, personalities to get it done.
Absolutely. And personality is such a big part of it. And having that innovative streak and that, yes, first principles mentality, but understanding you're working within an ecosystem that has existed, depending how you define it, for years or hundreds of years, and where there's a really high risk aversion. Things can't break because people's power supply and in some cases people's lives are on the line. This isn't a move fast and break things world, but it is a world that needs to innovate.
I love that. As someone investing in the future of energy, what trends in clean tech do you think some people are maybe even overlooking right now? Obviously, we talked about solar and battery. Are there anything else that's out there that people maybe aren't putting such a magnifying glass on?
There's so many fascinating segments. And at this point in the history of the energy investment landscape, frankly, so many funds and so many diverse investors. I wouldn't have said that 10 or even 5 years ago, but I don't think there's much that is completely unrecognized. But I think the macro or the meta aspect that broadly is not appreciated is how economics driven this trend is. And maybe within our echo chamber, people say it and agree, but more broadly, the politicization of energy and climate, and you can't say the word clean tech anymore or clean, that shouldn't matter to economic decision makers. So I love this construct that within wind and solar, for example, your fuel, your feedstock literally comes for free out of the air. What capitalist wouldn't want to explore that?
You would think, right?
So I think that's maybe the time horizon that, sure, there'll be policy headwinds and tailwinds, and there probably was an overfeeding for a while, at least a healthy feeding that extended a bit longer than needed to, and that's been pared back now, and somewhere the market will settle. But longer term, the superior unit economics of cheap or free sustainable feedstock will prevail, and then you move on to, okay, how do you service that generation capacity?
Yeah.
Again, one reason we loved investing in Omnidian, and we can talk about that in more detail later, but where are the bottlenecks that need this to now work at super high reliability, at attractive cost to the end consumer in a systematically integrated way, dynamically to load and power demands in a changing economy, AI and everything else. So I think there's a lot to invest in once you are on board with that fundamental fact.
Yep.
The long arc of history here is we're going to use increasingly more renewable power.
Yep. As someone who was early to sustainable investing and to AI, frankly, what is your overall feeling about how much money has come into both those spaces in the last few years in VC? It's got to feel good for you that you were early to it, but it's also, you're in competition against a lot of these other firms. So,
yeah, I think we're at the moment at a relatively healthy level. In the early days, at least of Blue Bear, there were not enough investors. And then for a few years, there was probably too much capital. And I think the cartoon of that is the SPAC boom, which unfortunately and somewhat ironically probably kneecapped some of what would have been the most promising, most successful climate energy transition success cases by capitalizing them wrong or taking them into the wrong markets at the wrong time. So I think some of that has worked its way out of the system. Some of it will come back. But at the same time, we're seeing more founders and more new ideas than ever before. I mean, it's probably 3 to 5 times the number of deals per month in our tracker now as we had pre-IRA.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, we're at RE Plus right now, and you can go out on the show floor. That's quite loud behind us and see a few thousand of those companies right now. So it's exciting times, no doubt.
And you think they're all the same. Like, my God, how many solar battery technology companies can there possibly be? But they're all a bit differentiated, all in different perspective, like you said, personality, tech stack, market focus. So I think it's a very rich ecosystem. That's just solar and storage.
Yeah, I mean, despite market headwinds and policy headwinds, I remain incredibly bullish, as I'm sure you do. Omnidian, as you well know, expanded in Australia a few years ago. We've seen continued growth stateside in resi solar, residential solar. We still kind of lag the leaders in Australia and the EU in that department. But in the US, it is on a great path forward, despite all the headwinds I mentioned. What do you think is driving adoption beyond just environmental factors and like wanting to save the planet?
Yeah, I think it's a sneakily good and interesting question, which I probably don't have a satisfying answer for, but I'll try anyway. A nice conceptual answer is that Americans, like consumers elsewhere, but particularly in the American ethos, like this concept of independence and resilience. Not necessarily you've had a brownout or blackout yourself, but you may well have in Texas and California and elsewhere. You certainly have read about it. This concept that you can be self-sustaining, protect your family, your home, that's attractive. The economics have to work. And I think people underestimate the sophistication of kitchen table economics. But the kind of people who are looking at this stuff can build a spreadsheet or at least talk to somebody about what's the NPV of this? How much am I saving on against utility bills over how long of a time frame? How sensitive am I to power prices? People have seen power prices go up and up and up, and this gives you an element of protection against that. Policy, of course, is a big part of that puzzle. It's no coincidence that solar adoption has been faster in states and regions that have more incentives. Yeah, I think the opportunity to have confidence, again, I don't bring this back to Omnidian because I'm talking to you, but because it's true. I myself as a consumer have often dragged my feet about certain sustainability investments like rooftop solar. And one of the big concerns is, yeah, but is it really going to work all the time? And if it doesn't, is that going to hurt my financing? What's it going to do with my home insurance and all these other aspects? So as the tech stack gets richer and richer to protect against those single point arguments that the person sitting across the kitchen table from you might be making, you can check those fears off, as Brad used to say, and then commit. And I think the U.S. entrepreneurial environment and business environment is such that it motivates people to come up with all these different solutions to more acute pain points and bottlenecks that you might not have an entrepreneur bother to do in other markets.
It's so funny that you mentioned that, because my last home, I was actually an Omnidian customer, and immediately upon getting our solar installed, there was an issue with the clamps that they put on for the battery storage, and we weren't getting the monitoring data correctly, and they called it out immediately, and it got fixed. And I just, in my head, I was like, without that, I don't think I would have known or been able to figure that out. And I would have just expected that it was operational.
Yeah. And when you have a problem, what are you going to do? Complain to all your friends. Yeah. And then they're not going to go solar.
So. Exactly. No, we need the early adopters really continuing to tell the mass market, you can believe in this, it works, it helps with your utility bills, all those kinds of things. So we've been talking a lot about solar, we mentioned battery, but what is your prediction around the future of adjacent technologies like battery storage, EV charging, things like that?
Yeah, it feels like we're in a bit of a lull in this moment in history where you've got a set of incentives rolling off, a new paradigm not yet fully baked. But if you just zoom out like 5-10 years from now, there's no way we're not going to have dramatically higher EV adoption. I made the switch myself not that long ago, and it is just a categorically superior performance.
Same.
Everything that a motorhead would care about is better. And range is, every time somebody asks you, but what about the range? Every time you look model year after model year, it's another 10, 20% higher. And before you know it, it's higher than you would conceivably drive. Charging infrastructure is, to me, and I live in Wyoming, in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, not exactly the center of urban infrastructure. Yeah, I love it, but it's a small population.
Yep.
I haven't even bothered having to get a fast charger in my garage.
Yeah.
The same outlet I would plug a microwave into, I can charge my car sufficiently overnight.
Yep.
And the once in a while on a road trip, there's inevitably a destination. So I think that whole infrastructure is building out. And just like we invested in Omnidian, we invested in Charger Help, which is a solution for basically the reliability and predictability and performance of EV charging infrastructure. We've invested in Acure, which is similar for battery storage systems themselves. So any challenge or problem that people point to, yes, totally fair. And that's what we're going to fix. And that's what capitalism and innovation are good for. So yes, those are bottlenecks, but I think it's silly to think that, the same way any other technology had bottlenecks as it was scaling, that uniquely to renewable energy or electric vehicles, that we're not going to figure these ones out because of some, I don't know, again, politicization.
Nope. Well said. AI, obviously, hottest topic in a lot of circles, but in venture capital, I think something like 80% of capital these days in ventures go into AI. Where do you think we are? There's something called the Gartner hype cycle, right? That analyzes trends in the market and places them on this scale. Where do you think we are in that, or any other scale of like, are we in that crazy overhyping phase? Are we in like the general acceptance phase beyond that? Where do you place us today when it comes to AI?
If you zoom in on just the rate of increase of App Store downloads or search queries or valuation of companies like Anthropic and Coherent Video, the whole stack, it's hard not to place it on the steepest part of whatever curve you can think of. I hesitate to use the hype cycle example because it crashes after that. Yeah. And then eventually you get, the trough and then the plateau of enlightenment or slope of enlightenment. And maybe that's the paradigm.
Yeah.
And it no doubt will be. I mean, there will be certainly companies that flame out.
Yep.
But I think the classic technology S-curve is the more appropriate example where, yes, we're in a very steep phase of improvement of the underlying capability. And I was just looking at this for another conversation I was having with an infrastructure fund. People might say, yeah, but GPT 3, 4, 5 don't feel that different. I have the same kind of chat with, with the dialogue box on my phone, and it's not, I'm underwhelmed by the performance improvement. I still can't rely on it to do my laundry for me. So I think, yes, the immediate experience doesn't feel like it's accelerated as much and is not in sync with the equity valuation increases of a few of these celebrity companies. But if you look at, for example, the parameter count of the GPT models has gone from a few 100 million to a couple billion to hundreds of billions to 1 trillion to 3 trillion in each of the point releases over the last few years. And parameters, that's not just we put more data in it or we used more energy. That is more a measurement of the relationships and the kind of coefficients between items of information that it has learned. These are not inputs. These are learned factors. And that is like a brain improving in its understanding of its own context by orders of magnitude every year. And to say that that doesn't matter, I think is again, very short-sighted. We're maybe running into bottlenecks in the infrastructure, again, to use the energy analogy. But yeah, I'm very excited about the pace of technical advancement, multimodality, going from just text to now image to then voice to not only video, but most recently with Genie 3 world building, where you can generate whole immersive 3D environments while you're looking around and turning your head. A new world generates in front of you that just didn't exist a second before. It's mind-blowing. So I think that's all very exciting. I think my best guess, and I have no idea, is there's a 20% chance that all this leads to some kind of spectacular, unconceivable utopia. Maybe 20% chance that it's the end of the world and we're all going to be destroyed by the robots living in the Matrix soon. But I think a 60% chance that this just becomes a tremendously functional, rich, new tool set and augmentation that humanity has to work with and grow with, like a higher version of what's happened with electricity and the internet and compute, where we're still people. We still have challenges. We're still annoyed about our jobs in some ways and excited in other ways, but we're able to do things orders of magnitude more and more expansively than we could have conceived of a generation ago.
You bring up a great point about energy, because we obviously sit in a spot in between AI and energy. And obviously the downside of that is people are talking about the energy usage of AI. Thoughts on that? Like for me, it's like we continue to see compute energy needs come down. We continue to see more energy needed for hyperscale. I tend to believe that's almost a bonus for renewables and that it might drive further growth of renewables. But what are your thoughts overall on like energy and AI?
Yeah, I don't want to sound naive on this. Very acute challenges, especially in short and medium term, and we can talk about the climate science or lack thereof in another question, if you like. I try to just take that off the table.
Yeah.
I happen to have my beliefs. I don't need to expect or assume you to have the same beliefs.
Yep.
Again, we're talking about quality of life, planetary well-being, and all those things in the medium term, and it might take some grinding to get there. So I think there will be dramatically higher emissions over the next few years. And that's probably going to lead to higher carbon intensity per unit of whatever is relevant, watt or operation, economic unit of economic productivity. But I think over the medium term, which these timeframes are all accelerating so much now.
Yep.
But I think that is going to be reduced by, number one, whatever the energy is being consumed for, the utility of that has value too. So it's not just a denominator. There's a very big and powerful numerator. So all the operations that a person would have otherwise had to drive around and take the opportunity cost of doing their job, taking care of their family, stewarding the environment, whatever, those jobs and the tasks and thoughts and ideas being executed almost instantaneously frees up so much economic and really even environmental footprint to be used to better purpose. And then the power itself, I believe, is going to be increasingly renewable in source and probably on-site and better integrated and better temporally managed with storage and distribution infrastructure improvements. So to just say that because we're consuming more compute, we're outputting more carbon, that relationship is breaking already.
Yep. Yeah. And I'm not paid to be on the show and opine, but like for me, it's like, we're not stopping this train. So let's look at this as opportunity. How do we make the most of this? How do we, like you said, get as much renewable energy on the grid as possible to power all these needs and make the most of the opportunity that's out there?
Yeah. And it's up to us to use the AI for productive, additive things.
Exactly.
Power it efficiently.
AI is neutral. It's in the hands of the user. Okay. You've talked about a lot of your other investments, great companies. How do you evaluate when you're looking at like a novel, sustainable, I almost said clean energy tech, and I'm not supposed to say that, sustainable energy or sustainable technology? How do you analyze it and look at it? Will this actually deliver on its promises, especially when it's something super nascent or novel? Like, what's your process for understanding the future potential of that?
Yeah. Short answer is I don't. Try not to.
That's fair.
By definition, if it's a really novel energy technology, then it is contrarian, and it's something that the consensus of the technical and engineering community doesn't agree with or believe in. Otherwise, it already would exist and be deployed and funded. So why is it coming to me? So I think if you're going to take those bets, either you need to have a really deep technical team within your investment team, PhD level engineers and scientists, and or you want to build a very big portfolio of moonshots. And I think both of those strategies exist out there in the market, and I love that they do, but it's not what Blue Bear does.
Yeah.
We're focused on, we're sharp entrepreneurs applying capital-light digital solutions that clearly make sense. There's already early signs of market pull. But yeah, I look to, and I get to part of the fun of the job is I get to hang out with a lot of these deep tech investors, and over drinks, there's very fluid debate about what really makes sense and what's just a flyer. It's like, yeah, I have no idea what they're talking about or how it's going to work, but
it sounds good.
It's part of a venture portfolio. If it works, it's going to change the world. And I love that exists, but I'm not going to compete for it.
That's probably wise on your part. So I should have told my listeners from the outset, Blue Bear, of course, is an investor in Omnidian, which you've mentioned. Why did you choose originally to invest in Omnidian and stay in support of us over the years?
Yeah, well, the supporting part's been easy, just the caliber of the team, the personalities, leadership, the combination of a great culture and work environment and really strong values that, again, Mark and Ray and Brad and Dave and the team have demonstrated and maintained and led with performance. The company's just grown.
Yeah.
Every time we look, it's more megawatts under management, better ARR, higher capital efficiency metrics, all that stuff's been really positive. The initial decision, the higher level was coming out of energy private equity. A lot of my work had been in energy field services or oil field services. And I had a strong belief that renewables field services is the underappreciated next thing we need. So the costs have come down on solar, for example. But looking at the oil and gas world, it's not Exxon and Chevron that are the highest valued companies at the best margins. It's Schlumberger and Halliburton that have the higher EBITDA margins and higher valuation multiples. So, and that's because people rely on them to operate day in, day out for decades. And I believed strongly that same need would play out in renewables as renewables passed the proof of concept and went into full-scale deployment mode. And Omnidian is one of the early companies. Raptor Maps is another example, Shoreline in the wind industry. But Omnidian's a really strong example of exactly that philosophy. Everybody's focused on putting solar on roofs. Great, keep doing that. But the moment you put the solar on the roof, it now needs to work for the next 20 years, 30 years. And Omnidian's technical and commercial capability to do that was really compelling.
Yeah. I think we just viewed it as we owed it to the consumer to follow through on that promise that, this is going to be for the next 30 years, your energy source. So,
and I remember Mark making that point, and he was, I forget exactly what his job title was, but head of field services or O&M or aftermarket, and frustrated that his department, while critical to the long-term performance of the assets, was not getting the budget to hire the best technology and product development people, for example. So let's start this from scratch. Let's build what we know our customers need and put the right team together for it.
Seems like a wise decision now. Based on your experience across public, private investing, how does the market overall currently misprice sustainability risk or opportunity?
I think it's just that. It's that it is considered as a ancillary non-economic factor that you maybe put a premium or a discount on. Whereas really sustainability, the full meaning of the term, is your business going to sustain? Are you feeding into a sustainable ecosystem? So to the extent that a valuation is the discounted value of future cash flows with some risk factor, if you are enhancing your business model to be sustainable to changing business, governance, socio-political pressures, the better you do that, the longer and richer your cash flow stream will be at a lower discount. So I'd like to think that's part of it. And we're starting to see maybe a cartoon version of that with shareholder capitalism 5, 6, 7 years ago. And maybe that pendulum swung too far and now it's swung too far back. But there's an equilibrium point where social license to operate is going to become something people need to factor into the discount rate of future cash flows.
If you were advising an infrastructure investor today who had significant assets under management and they were looking to start making sustainability investments in their portfolio, what's the one thing that you would advise on them to do first so that 5 years from now, they can look back and be like, thank God Ernst came around and told me to focus on that?
Well, I don't claim to know more than people who are actually in that seat, and some very smart people and good friends are in those seats. But the easier answers, I think, are things like energy storage and grid infrastructure. And no surprise, they're already being done. So I think you didn't ask me to choose a contrarian one necessarily. But the cost curves are going to keep coming down on battery technology, whether that's expressed in range or weight or duration. The performance parameters relative to cost and even in absolute terms are going to keep improving. So the cheaper and more flexible and more capable battery storage technology becomes, the more you can deploy it wherever. And the fact that it's already so commonly paired with solar generation and mobile and residential scale, utility scales, I think sign of things to come.
The density factor is exciting too. Like I was just looking at a recent, I think it was Canadian Solar just deployed a new container that's like 8.2 megawatts or something in a single, it's like for C&I, especially like with space restrictions, all of a sudden you can get a lot of power in a really small box, if you will. So it's exciting. All right, lightning round questions, your quick hits on these. 5 years from now, 2030, what is going to be the fastest growing renewable energy source? Solar, wind, battery, small modular nuclear, for those who are believers. I mean, I love nuclear, but I don't know about 5 years.
Well, I resisted being contrarian on the last answer, so I'll lean in on this one. Wind, especially offshore wind in the U.S.
A bullish statement on that. Okay.
Rule number one, don't build it in direct line of sight from a very powerful person's golf course.
That's amazing.
If you constrain wind project development to where there are incredibly strong natural resources, and there clearly are. People talk, I was listening to a podcast the other day, some tech bros, that wind doesn't work because you don't know when the wind's. Of course we know.
Yeah.
It's like, well, you can't drill wells because you don't know where the oil is going to be. It's like, sure, there's a factor, but people study this. There's a risk-weighted portfolio. But anyway, there's these massive, basically, atmospheric rivers of energy just flowing through the sky in a lot of places. And the levelized cost of energy at the right site with the right equipment, which is getting more and more powerful and efficient, is actually best in class. People talk about it like it's worst in class. And yes, it has been taking advantage of PTCs, production tax credits, because they've been offered. So therefore, people have been bidding with those in mind. You take those off the table, fine. People have to readjust their economics, their spreadsheets, and plug our company Shoreline is used exactly for this. But the economics are really strong, and specifically regions where that demand at that volume and location is highly desired.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying we should build them all over the place. I'm saying if there's a state and a county that wants them and has the infrastructure onshore to bring those electrons on, has data centers and C&I load and so on, then I think with a return to more free market policy on this topic, and yeah, I like Chris Wright personally. He's very intelligent and knowledgeable about the energy industry, but I think there are topics that have just become kind of exaggerated and cartoonishly penalized. And I think this is one of those. And in a 5-year time frame, not only will it return, but your question was about growth rate. So given how low the base is, the growth rate will be off the charts.
Okay, that's actually a really smart way to catch the nuance of the question. It's funny you mentioned wind too, because I was just telling someone I'm going to get solar on my house again, on my new house. I had the system I'd mentioned earlier on my last house. There's these wind turbines now that you can get for your residents that are like, they're bladeless. They're actually kind of beautiful. And I live in this weird little like microclimate neighborhood where it is so windy parts of the year. I'm like, I'm going to do solar combined with wind at my house, and it's going to be amazing. I'm super excited about it.
Amen.
If you had the free capital, you're just an incredibly wealthy guy, and you had the ability to just invest in anything that you believe in, but it's completely unproven today, what would that be? What's that magic unicorn idea out there that you're a believer in?
I'm tempted to go the quantum direction. Take time and deep tech, but I think there's something to it. But I'll go a step farther since you're giving me the latitude. IDR. We've looked at VR, virtual reality, and AR, augmented reality. We've even invested in industrial uses for augmented reality. I think the ultimate frontier is interdimensional reality. I think there are tiers of physics that we don't yet understand, we're working on. There's a lot that kind of seems like it almost makes sense, and the math points us in a direction that we can't quite figure out the rest of the puzzle yet. But if you could develop and commercialize, but develop and deploy the ability for humans to see and engage with the full dimensionality of space, I think that would be tremendous. See the Matrix, maybe see ghosts, see the next levels of physics, and work and build in that space. If you read some of these out there sci-fi novels, Foundation series, for example, there's a lot that actually kind of makes sense, but it requires some leaps of imagination. So I'd love to invest in powering through those leaps.
That's probably the most fascinating answer I've had to that question yet.
I love maybe the least relevant.
I love that you exist in like two completely different worlds of like real financial impact and like this, I don't know, like incredible future state that involves the Matrix and things like that. I love it. It's cool to see someone else like talk about that in a real world setting. It's fun.
I love that about our sector, that a lot of people do have these passions and these interests and these academic curiosities and want to make the world better in their own way. And that's what makes this job and this community so fun.
Ernst, thank you for coming all the way down from Jackson Hole to meet me here in the desert at RE+. Safe travels back if you're driving your EV. Hopefully there's a few stops along the way. But for all my listeners, thanks for joining us on The Future Current. I'll see you next time.